The point of this presentation today is that there's been a whole lot of learning going on. We have really deliberately undertaken a journey of learning with all of this, and you know, whether it was intentional or not, we wouldn't be able to help but learn from all the experience that we've had locally. And so what I am going to do today is give you what I see as the highlights along those points that lead us to the point that we are at right now, which is a big transitional, transformational stage where we are looking to do exactly what Morris says, where we look to connect these different pieces, all tried and true in different places and different times, but never yet connected in a coherent system, and that's what we really want to accomplish locally and beyond. So once upon a time in 1995, I was one of about 15 people on a planning committee who started Madison Hours local currency, and it was a pretty new system at the time. We were emulating Ithaca Hours, which was just started in '91, so they were 4 years old, first wave of like modern complementary currencies, although I think probably all of you here know there's nothing new about using things other than money, the kind that's in most of our pockets. So it's much older to use other means of exchanging and sharing than the kind of money we're all using now. So, but this current wave of complementary currencies, in my view, started with Paul Glover's Ithaca Hours. So 4 years later, we decided to emulate that here. And when we were starting Madison Hours, we did a lot of outreach in communities where there's a lot of poverty. One of the things that was disappointing to me doing outreach for Madison Hours is it didn't tend to resonate in those communities, and it didn't tend to stick or be adopted. I have ideas now about why. Some of it's just our relative lack of experience at the time, but some of it I think is structural. And we can go into that more or less depending on what you guys want to talk about. But some of this stuff I'm going to rush through because it's been a huge year. So anyhow, in 2004, so Madison Hours does do some things very well. It instigates conversations about the value of people's time. It does operate somewhat more equitably than you know, national currency. It can't be loaned at interest. It can only circulate locally. So it is a boost to the local economy. But there are just some limitations that I think are inherent to that model. In 2004, I read a book called The Future of Money by Bernard Lietaer, and you'll hear more about him later. And that's when I began to understand there are a lot of different types of models that fill a lot of different types of functions. And time banking and time banking is one form of mutual credit, but mutual credit where we join together in a network where we extend credit to one another. Mutual credit is free and fluid because it's whoever's in the network deciding to extend the credit to each other. You don't have to get permission. You don't have to get your hands on, you know, money that comes from a bank or someone who decides to loan it, or that you're deserving of getting a loan or deserving of getting paid. You can extend that credit to each other. And then the aspect of time banking where everyone's time is valued equally and there's not a price put on it, I think creates a whole different dynamic. So they do different things that overlap, and what we're looking to do here is to create a community economy that can flourish alongside a market economy and overlap with it, but not be totally dependent on it as it has been through most of our lifetimes. So we decided to embark on a very deliberate learning journey, and a number of you have been at some of these. We started doing builders workshops. It was actually Mark's idea. I go on tours sometimes and do time bank trainings and play music also, and Mark said at one point, I think you should go on tour here, do the stuff here that you do on a tour. And it made so much sense, and then also gives us a chance, since we can do a progression over time, we can just delve more deeply into all of these things than we'd be able to without having that sort of journey together. And we always ask, or almost always ask, these two questions at the beginning. What would you do to improve your community if you could? And what if money were no object? And then we realize, really, in a lot of circumstances, money doesn't need to be an object. This is another point of this learning journey that was really important to me. What Berkana Network does is they're working with several communities around the world. So Brazil and India, Greece, South Africa, Mexico, and Columbus, Ohio is one of the communities they're working in. And what they do is work with groups of people and use some pretty dynamic facilitating processes. Do you know Art of Hosting? Art of Hosting is sort of a type of facility. It's like a community of practice who do different types of group facilitation, and they call it the art of hosting conversations that matter. But it's really about sort of nurturing and tapping into the collective intelligence, so we can, so everyone gets a chance to be heard and participate in really answering the difficult questions that we have. So the very first, so what they do is they work with these communities and they do really cool projects, and then they connect them together so they learn from each other. And they call it trans-local learning and replication, so everyone can sort of, you know, raise the tide and lift all the boats. But this particular project really caught my attention. I'm just going to describe it briefly. In this city in Brazil, in a very poor area, there was an 11,000 square foot abandoned Apple computer warehouse. And it was in an area that was really a hub for a lot of crime and drug activity and stuff. And they showed a film of it. It was ankle to knee deep in like feces and blood and syringes and trash. And what they did was this group of people, I don't know how many they started with, maybe 10 or something, but this group of people decided that in a month's time they were going to transform it into a cultural center. And they were going to do it with just a few simple rules. One was they weren't going to spend any money, and one was that no one could be in the space for more than 15 minutes at a time. Because I figure then it can be like a game, like anyone can handle this grossness for up to 15 minutes, and after that it becomes a chore. So they just stated the intention.
Teacher, that was Curitiba.
Oh, was it?
Curitiba, Brazil.
Oh, okay. Great. But they accomplished it, because as soon as they declared the intention and started putting out the word of mouth really spread. People were having fun. News crews would come, and then new crews of people would come. And so they accomplished it. They turned this horrible thing into a cultural center within a month and spent no money to do it. And then they were all gung-ho to do more stuff later. So I found that extremely inspirational, and it became a big goal and dream of mine to connect with these folks and see if we could start to kind of institutionalize that approach or really expand on that, instead of doing 7 communities, doing as many as we could get on board. So then another piece during these builders workshops at the very beginning, it became really like one of the early builders workshops was about obstacles and barriers to making this stuff work. And some of the things that became really apparent are the main barriers that we have are the difficulties in communication among human beings, like people not calling back, people not remembering to take their offers down, or how people responded when they were asked to do things. And it just became clear, first of all, like how we communicate with one another is a big issue, but then also we've grown up our whole lives being immersed in a lot of structure and being immersed in situations where people are telling us what to do all the time. So we go through school and are told what to do, and get out of school and get a job. So I think we have not really developed our muscles about working together on projects and facilitating group activity. So that was one of the issues that I thought we really would need to tackle. And because I'm interested in doing something where any community would be able to take these kinds of tools on and run with them, I thought we should do something that provides some training for people in collaboration and project facilitation that doesn't necessarily require them to go through a training where they have to be physically present with other people. So that was an early builders workshop, is realizing that a game might help with that. So we started designing a game called the Build a Better World game, and it starts off as a board game, and it's gone through a lot of evolutions, and it's intended to continue to evolve forever. So the idea is you would do the activities as a board game. There's a swap meet, there's a work party, there's a scavenger hunt where you go door to door and invite everyone to play. But then if you choose to, you can keep going, and you can do it in real life. So you can do a scavenger hunt where you go and invite people to come to your swap meet and then to your work party. So we're using that as a way to really flex those muscles. And we've done that one time. We did the board game, and then we went and did some of the activities in real life in Allied Drive in service of the Allied Community Co-op. So this is a piece of this development, and there'll be more on that later. And then we started jumping into workshops on how time banking is being applied to specific issues. So we focused on number 4, we focused on health and wellness. And so we learned about neighbor-to-neighbor care teams that are being developed in a hospital-based time bank in Pennsylvania. And we learned about the approach that Visiting Nurses Service in New York. It's a 3,500 member time bank with 29 languages represented. Half the people don't speak English at all, and they have a very thriving time bank there. And then Paul Glover, he's the founder of Ithaca Hours right there in the middle, and he has moved to Philadelphia, and he's working on starting a beautiful vision of a very comprehensive health and wellness cooperative that uses time banking and also other kinds of currencies. He's calling it Medicash. MEDI, Medicash, for people to meet their health and wellness needs. He actually has a parcel of land with first right of refusal to purchase, like right in the heart of Philadelphia, right in a low-income neighborhood. And that's one of the things that I would like us to accomplish as a global community who want these things to happen, is find a way for him to raise the $500,000 he needs to make that a reality. We're going to talk about crowdfunding a little bit later, but someone recently raised $1.3 million to market an album that was already recorded. So if that could happen, we can get $500,000 for Patch Adams' very comprehensive, beautiful new model of health and wellness. Because we knew, so actually I didn't spell this out in the first slide when we talked about Madison Hours and the Dane County Time Bank. We've known for a few years that we want to connect these pieces together, that there's enough overlap between time banking and Madison Hours, and they fill enough of a different role that it would make sense to pull the functions into an ecosystem that's deliberate and coherent. So one of the very main reasons we started the Builders Workshops is to really develop enough local literacy here in these issues to tackle that, because there is a lot of complexity to these, and these different models have a lot of different history, and there's a lot to learn about it. So sessions numbers 6 and 7, we jumped into healthy community economy, about what are the tools available to us and how do they work in concert. So Mark developed this theory early on when we were working together, where he was mapping out currencies to like levels of the food chain in an ecosystem. So we started thinking of gift economy and sharing and time banking and the things that really we treat as very infinitely abundant. Started thinking of those as like the photosynthesis that turns really infinitely abundant raw materials, like all the nutrients and the sunlight, and turns them into value, turns them into some plants. And then you go up to levels that are a little bit more competitive, a little bit more scarce. So something like Madison Hours, where there's a price attached and and there's not an infinite amount in circulation, that would be more like up a level on the food chain, and then going up from there to the apex predators, the wolves, which are the currencies that we all use today, and the very competitive currencies. And we're making the point there's a place in nature for the wolves. We just have to make sure they don't eat everything. And right now, the wolf has eaten everything. So it's time to sort of replant the garden and get it back into balance. And we also realize that this is also too simplistic of a anything is going to be, but this is too simplistic too. Like, we don't need to just, I mean, it separates on a lot of different levels, because there are also other kinds of structures besides currencies, like cooperative ownership. And so we started talking about that stuff and broke these things down into what are the functions of an economy, what's an economy do, and then thinking about appropriate tools for the different things. So one function is exchanging service that's very abundant. Well, that makes sense to exchange with something that's very abundant. And one function is incentivizing certain behavior. So there are lots of different ways to do that with lots of different currencies, scarce ones and abundant ones. And one thing is about storing value, and complementary currencies haven't successfully tackled that. One of the things that was very interesting to me in these sessions is I really expected that people would latch on to the business-to-business mutual credit. So I'm going to call it price-based mutual credit. And we have a problem with terminology. That's something that we're going to have to tackle too. But I'm just going to write these. I'm going to kind of make a glossary, because there's no like real nice shorthand way to say that. But what that means is you're exchanging just like you are in the time bank, but there's a price on things. So I can buy a cooler from your business for $1,000 worth of credit, and we would pay the appropriate taxes on that. I wouldn't have to get a loan where I'm paying it back at interest. I'll owe that $1,000 in goods and services to other businesses in the network. Does that make sense to people? Just be like if it was 10 hours and 5 hours, and the difference is it's legal, to operate in a business, you can pay the taxes on it. So you don't have to, one of the things in time banking, and we'll get to this about strengths and limitations, in time banking we don't have a money equivalent, and it's been declared tax exempt by the IRS in certain cases, but who knows if they would choose to revisit it at some point. And so a lot of time banks will do things out of fear, or will not do things out of fear of the IRS. Like a lot of time banks won't let people exchange any goods for their time bank hours, for example. We feel that it's a very low risk and it's worth taking, and we're doing what we can to mitigate the rest. And part of that is to create a cleaner avenue so the taxable transactions can happen. And so we're not just always either avoiding it or feeling nervous about it if we do it. So for me, the two big reasons to connect to these things are, number one, I think we can make a system that's more effective for every participant. But number two, I think we can bring the strengths of each system to bear to make it more self-sustaining. So another aspect is the time bank runs by begging for money in lots of different forms, which is fine, and in some ways it's appropriate. We get a lot of government funding to run programs, like the medical transportation program is funded partly by the county. We've got federal grants from that, and we have inclusion work funded by the county, and we have youth court work funded by the schools. But it's always very difficult to get the money to sustain the administration of the organization. And so that's a piece that we need to bring in, and we'll go into that during the strengths and limitations. So we did map out a little bit about where you would need different things, and we keep using the Energy Project. Actually, sign us here. Can you raise your hand, sign? Sign us here from the Allied Energy Project, Power Time. Thanks for coming. And the Allied Co-op. And so that's a good one to play with, because we're really trying to apply these theories there. So we use time banking to really pool the resources that are in the neighborhood, which is a lot of people in the neighborhood have a lot of talents. So we use the time bank to make those visible, and then that's our resource base. And then some of the people with a lot of talents can have a talent to doing outreach for more intensive kind of resources. Like maybe we want movie tickets and gift certificates, and maybe we want to bring in used cars that people can earn for their time bank hours, or bikes. And that happens in places, so it's not unrealistic. And then we develop these resources that might be a little bit more scarce. And then at a certain point when we start, because our next goal is to start doing more weatherization of buildings. So we'll have to get more materials, and we'll have to get licensed carpenters to teach people how to do carpentry. So there's likely to be more money, or maybe if we get the business-to-business mutual credit going, it will substitute for money for people in those places. So that's when we need that sort of like more scarce piece that gets a little bit more complicated. Then one of the things that we want to do is assemble and install solar panels. So more cost for materials, but then also that's how we can start bringing in money more easily, because we're going on a model where, and there's one in West Virginia that's doing this, when people get the solar panels, they save like about 50% on their energy bill. They're required for a certain amount of time to put that amount of money into the project. So then we were looking at how we could do that and even flip that model. So when they put that money into the project, it's a cooperatively managed pool of money. Actually that gets into the next session. So the thing that really did resonate with people much more than the business-to-business mutual credit, that surprised me, but I think has ended up being a very good thing, is savings pools. And so we looked at Yak Bank in Sweden and some other models, but essentially the function that we are thinking about is in a savings pool, people will they'll choose to save, whatever amount of money you want to save. You don't have to put all your savings in it. In fact, we would probably discourage it when we're in the testing phase. But you put some money into the pool, and then that money is managed by the cooperative under whatever agreements there are. So it might be a saving and lending thing. So in the Yacht Bank, I can, after I've saved for a certain amount of time and have a good record of saving, then I'm eligible for a no-interest loan. And then I pay the loan back without interest, and as I'm paying it back, I'm rebuilding my savings. So it's just a much friendlier cooperative kind of banking system. But then there's some other innovations that we're interested in looking at, like how can we connect with the slow investing people? There are a lot of people in the slow money and slow investment movement who really don't have any responsible place to put their money very easily, and we would like to help them with that problem. So one of the goals, so there are two goals in the whole comprehensive picture for me. One is people being able to do good work and be supported by their community in doing good work. By good work, I mean the work that you love, the work that's important to you, the work that keeps your community thriving. It can be caring for your relative. I mean, any kind of good work. Take people out of the situation where they have to go do a job that's destructive to themselves or to the planet, or where they can cut their hours at that job. But do good work in the community, be supported by the community, and also create avenues for people to invest in a community by investing in the community rather than the way it tends to work now is people will give to a foundation or a nonprofit organization who will send someone like me to go work in the community and then leave. And I think there's value to that too. There's nothing wrong with organizations working in community. So the goal is to put pieces together, working with people like the Berkana Network, who we talked about in Walk Out, Walk On, and everything that we've learned about how we facilitate projects and everything that we will continue to learn as we do it more, and really create situations where you can invest in a community and that community has a process where they can identify what work they think needs done in the community, and they can do it, and they can earn time bank hours and money and mutual credit and anything they need to earn to have a good quality of life. So that's the big dream. This stuff is very brand new to us, so we're just going to start embarking on this. And actually, because I might forget to say this later, one of the things that I learned then, I ended up traveling a lot, which is kind of next in the thing, but one of the things that I learned is, I'll go back here, is New Zealand time banks are doing all this stuff. And we had already decided that we wanted to do the savings pools. And then Matthew, the guy who programmed our software, a bunch of you know him, he's been in New Zealand working with them to do software. And he sent me a message. He said, please, please, I'm begging you to consider doing these savings pools. The New Zealand time banks are looking at how to spend the $250,000 they've accumulated. I was like, well, you didn't need to talk us into it, but that helped also. So then a group of people from actually all over the country decided they wanted to hold an economic democracy conference here in Madison. And it was a reaction to the democracy conference that had happened the year before. And they just felt like it was such a common theme that really the economy is the problem. At one talk I gave a long time ago, I said, it's not the economy, stupid, it's the stupid economy. People have realized that's enough of a problem, and developed an understanding that we need to address it. So they organized the whole conference around economic democracy. And then I helped organize a local track of that, so a local action track. And I just put a couple highlights. But for me, a really big highlight was this workshop. This is the guy on the right that you can see better is Chris Meyer from Sector 67 Co-working Makerspace. And then that's Justice Castaneda on the left. And he was working as a consultant to the city about the achievement gap, if you're familiar with that term, but the achievement gap, and then also he was consulting about how the city should approach brownfield remediation. So there are a number of brownfields, meaning it's land that's been contaminated with toxic chemicals of some sort. And at some point, the city will put out a request for proposals about how to deal with those brownfields. And at this workshop was sort of the birth of the idea that perhaps we could create a type of cooperative, which I'll get into, mutual aid networks. Perhaps we could create a type of infrastructure where the community itself could be the response to brownfield remediation and help do things like all the way from learning about what kind of nutrition would help you avoid whatever health problems you're more likely to have because of the contamination, all the way up to identifying what kind of businesses you want in your community and helping develop that and helping ensure that local people are employed to do the carpentry on those businesses and employed at those businesses, and hopefully the co-op would own some of those businesses. So, but their particular workshop, they brought a 3D printer, and they really focused on the fact that these new manufacturing technologies, you can totally decentralize manufacturing. You soon, and you know, not right now, but in a lot of ways, we have what we need to really do some much more hyper-localized production where people in their own communities can make the things that we need. And his example was that the states had, that the city had just recently replaced all of the paper towel and toilet paper dispensers in all of their buildings, and they bought them from Georgia Pacific, which is a big funder of Scott Walker. And had we been really smart, we could have had little cooperatives doing, you know, 3D printing. He showed us a mechanism. It's just a simple plastic mechanism. But those are the kinds of, that's the kind of ground up economic development that I think that we really should be looking at. The art of hosting community of practice about how you facilitate projects and host conversations that matter. Actually, we've been having people in the Allied Co-op get art of hosting training. I've gone to art of hosting training. Katie, her project that she's part of is largely a result, and maybe what you're doing too on behalf of UCP, I think has a lot to do with the fact that art of hosting came to town and did these trainings, and a lot of county staff came and got trained about how to have these more inclusive conversations, and the county hosted some processes like this that ended up in resulting in our being able to create a position to build neighbor-to-neighbor care teams. So that was really important to me, and the reason I wanted to mention this is, Bert, I quoted you a bunch of times at one of on this tour.
I'll charge you for that.
yeah, each time. each mention was very brief. No, anyway, so at one of the art of hosting trainings, it was actually, Bert wasn't one of the ones doing the training. I went to his session, his open space session, and he said something that was so helpful to me that I just wanted to share it with everyone who's ever doing any kind of organizing of people, which is, there are 3 different types of people who would you like to say it?
Sure. When you're working with community people, it's important to understand that, and there are different variations of this, but a basic one is think of what the people you're working with in 3 different ways. There are people who are explorers, you know, people who go out and do anything new and fresh. There are people who will follow explorers and do pioneering work, and then there are people who are farmers, and they do the real work. And when you're undertaking a community project, understand that and know that on the front end, it's the explorers you're working with. On the back end, they may not be there at all because they're not interested in doing farming. So it's very important to understand these different types of people and honor them. They all provide you with great value.
And don't be so depressed when your explorers leave, because they do. And even though I've lived it a million times, just hearing that from you just helped my perspective on it so much. And I've said that in so many settings on this, and so much of the time people do the same thing, like, because it lets you off the hook and it lets off every other human being. So then Charles Eisenstein, he wrote the book Sacred Economics, and a new book, The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. He came and did a full-day workshop with us here that was really about how to identify the gifts that you have to give to the world and how to get to a place where you are ready to give them to the world. And one of the takeaways from me, which I apply in this work, is in a lot of the exercises he does, it becomes really clear that it's a lot easier a lot of times to identify and name the gifts you see in someone else than it is to identify your own gifts. I think maybe because we're humble Midwesterners or something, or like no one wants to be arrogant, or you overlook your own gifts. But that's one of the things that got me to think, you know, I think it would really help all this stuff if we developed ways we could commission work from other people. So that's another piece of this, is like figuring out how we can hire our friends and neighbors to do the cool things we know they're capable of doing on our own projects. One of the issues that people have in time banking is not everyone's attracted to it, and if I have time bank hours to spend, but I can't get my neighbors aren't accepting them for whatever reason, they have less value to me. And that's one of the ideas, is to create situations where we are hiring each other for time bank hours and just sort of greasing the wheels by commissioning work from each other. So next step is understanding that cooperative ownership and cooperative management of all of our tools and processes and projects is making a lot of sense, and that's something that we are looking at right now. If I have time bank hours to spend, but I can't get my neighbors aren't accepting them for whatever reason, they have less value to me. And that's one of the ideas, is to create situations where we are hiring each other for time bank hours and just sort of greasing the wheels by commissioning work from each other. Does that make sense to people? So next step is understanding that cooperative ownership and cooperative management of all of our tools and processes and projects is making a lot of sense, and that's something that we are looking at right now. Who was here for the Bernard Lietaer and Jackie Dunn workshop? Does anyone want to throw out a highlight of it? Go ahead.
Bernard Lietaer is an internationally respected economist and banker. He worked in many fields, but specifically with respect to this, he was involved with the creation of complementary currencies in the world, specifically Switzerland, and essentially developed a couple of other concepts that enable linking time to the exchange of currencies by the use of insurance companies as storehouses for the money exchange. So you have somebody who can exchange money for you and then return the available hours of credit. The available hours of credit are used, etc. So now, once you have a government-approved corporation handling the money, then you can go to changing the local currency, having it live underneath the established scarce money currency. And everybody has their own way of functioning. The people who want to make money using money can be up here, and those of us who want to exist without having to worry, are their mistakes going to affect this layer? So we've got our own layer, they've got their own layer. Good luck to them.
And it was great that was the point that you made, because that's the one that ended up sticking most. So, so in the model that he was recommending for us, businesses can use a kind of complementary currency, but then you get the insurance companies involved, so the businesses could choose to cash it in for cash if they want to. And that's a big oversimplification of this. But that's what he recommended, and he recommended a particular type of legal structure to manage it. And I thought it was very interesting in the moment, but I actually was thinking, this is sort of a higher level than what we really are serving right now, where it's like bigger businesses. And then, though, I had a little epiphany the next Monday, because I woke up and was in a total panic because, as is common, we had a big cash flow problem at the time bank, because most of our funding comes from government contracts and grants, and they're reimbursement basis. So we have to spend the money that we don't have, and then we have to ask them to reimburse us. And it's incredibly stressful. Anyone who spends much time with me knows that periodically I'm freaking out. And so I was freaking out this Monday morning, and then all of a sudden I realized, oh, this is who that would be really good for, people like us. Because the idea of this currency model that he was talking about is you can pay in this currency, it's worth X number of dollars, and you're exchanging it between each other, but more people will accept it, like more big businesses will accept it because they know they can turn it in for cash, and it helps to level the playing field between big players and small players. But then, so I thought, okay, this would work for us, and I got really, started thinking we should look at it. But then I realized the pieces that we're talking about, if we're talking about including the saving and investment pool, we could use that. That could be something that a group could choose, is to manage the money in a way that that pool of money could be the insurance. So if people chose to cash in their currency, So it was just like a simpler way to do it, structuring as a cooperative and using the cooperative saving and lending pool. Yeah, so one of the things that has happened over the last year is I did a tour and went all over, not all over the world, but to a lot of places around the world, and did time banking workshops and meetings and participated in conferences. I used to be very active in Time Banks USA, and now I still work with Time Banks USA, but I'm not officially a part of it. And one of the things that has been an outstanding need is for us to really help build each other's skills and learn from each other. And we generally have had a national conference every 2 years. We hosted a couple of them. Some of you, that's how I met you, in 2007 and 2009. And there wasn't capacity to have a national conference over the last year, but I was helping facilitate this process where people around the world, mostly around this country, but in other countries too, who are doing similar work, not just time banking, but other cooperative kind of work or complementary currency kind of work, where we're coming together to really work on applying all these same tools and principles to ourselves so we can really support each other more effectively, more sustainably, distribute resources between and among us more effectively. And that process is called Knit a Network, and it actually factors into the presentation today, so I'll be bringing it up a couple times. But in the Knit a Network group, we had a work group on training and peer support, and so we decided to make my tour like a rolling conference. So what we did was just put out the call to anybody who's doing similar stuff. Most of it went out through Time Banks using the Time Banks USA software, some other currency software, and just like through currency and cooperative lists and stuff. So anyone could choose to host a gathering, and they could do it any size and any style. And you'll see there was a lot of variety. So some of the gatherings were like a couple of people meeting for lunch and brainstorming. In Boise, Idaho, I met with the new coordinator of the Time Bank, and it was just 3 people having lunch. And then in The Hague in the Netherlands, it was a 300-person, massive, hugely expensive conference, complementary currencies conference. That was happening anyhow. This one didn't happen because of my tour, in case I gave the wrong impression there. On the tour, I ended up calculating it at the end, and so I just counted the people I directly interacted with. So at the big conference, I didn't count all 300 people. I counted people who came to our open space and came to our presentation and came to the panel that I was on and stuff. But all told, there were 68 Time Bank related events with 1,437 participants. So that was a big conference, which was really exciting to me. And yeah, just nice to see. And also every single situation, there was so much to learn from. So the tour started in May, and right before we started the tour, we had been talking about how to pull together the different threads, and we had come to an idea that we would create a cooperative structure. So I operate better with like some metaphors. So I consider the cooperative sort of like the plot in which you are growing things or whatever. So it's the space, it's the group and the governance, the group that's choosing to pool resources and that's choosing to apply them toward good work and projects. And then they manage these 3 pieces, which are time, price-based mutual credit, and then these savings pools. And we just went into this briefly earlier, and this is something that we can go into and clarify for people who come in newly. But they manage these, and they govern them like a commons. So one of the things we also learned from Bernard Lietaer when he was here was about principles of governing a commons. A woman named Elinor Ostrom, who won the Nobel Peace Prize several years ago, she sort of pioneered that and has some excellent principles about how you govern something together that you collectively own. So the cooperative would manage these pieces in service of doing good work and being supported by your community. So then there'd be other pieces connected to help people do that effectively. So some of those processes of like the game that I showed you earlier, the board game about how the game that teaches you how to collaborate on a project, and some of the processes of technical assistance and providing templates for agreements, the types of agreements that people would make to make this effective. And we started calling them mutual aid networks for several reasons. One is there's a lot of conversation about mutual aid. Insurance actually started off as a very, as mutual aid societies. If you've ever been to New Orleans, for example, you can go to this great backstreet cultural museum and learn about mutual aid societies, which were people pooling their money for their own insurance. So if someone got hurt or sick, they could access that pool of money. And then it got perverted into the profit-driven insurance model that we have today. So much of one of the problems that we respond to in time banking is that it is very transactional. In order to get a time bank hour, someone has to pay you a time bank hour. And we want to start to recognize and catalyze and reward rebuilding the commons. So there shouldn't have to be someone to pay you if you are creating new value in a given community. So one of the ways that we express this in our time bank is when we have a project, we make an account in our time bank that's the project, and the project pays out the hours for the work that needs to be done to make that project happen. To me, that's a very clean and very good way for these to come into existence, because you're generating something. But that's an issue we want to tackle sort of at a more systemic level too, is really how do we recognize and value contributions to the commons. And so that's a big piece of it, and one of the reasons that I wanted to get away from sort of banking language and use it sometimes, but not have that be the end all and be all. And mutual aid, like the fact that we're going to come together and support each other, whether it's transactional or whether it's collective action or whatever we're doing, I think really expresses it. And then there's this one little piece that I really like and not everyone does, but since this is all about focusing on good work and creating an opportunity for people to do the work that they want to do, I would like to help people create their dream jobs working for the man. I think that we can have a little bit of cultural communication. So we had decided on mutual aid network as a term, a working term that we're using. And when I was talking with Mark about how I should go about collecting contact information from people while I was on my trip, we thought we'd just try a rough draft of a mutual aid network. And essentially this is a rough draft. Mark's rebuilding it in a different platform. But what it is really is a borderless time bank. So people can join, and you see Tony up here. He says what he can offer locally, what he can offer anywhere, and then we also can post projects and we can ask people to contribute work to projects, and then we can exchange time. But this is like, that's the rough draft, and then the next phase will be out sometime in the...
It's very much work in progress.
Yeah. And everything is and always will be. And that's one of the issues that we deal with is a lot of this stuff people tend to associate really with the tools we're using. Like people are always like, oh, the software, like whole time banks will be like, oh, our software isn't good enough, so we're not going to do anything except focus on software. But that's always a disappointment. Good software can really help, so don't get me wrong. But the real thing that makes time banks work are people, communication, bringing people together. There are time banks that use much slicker software than what we use, but it almost 100%, or I don't know, I have to say 100% in my experience interacting with a lot of time banks. The ones that do well are the ones that bring people together face to face for events and projects and get people getting to know each other, and there's no substitute for it. And software could really help. So here's Morris giving the report. We started off with a regional gathering in Wisconsin. We did it on super short notice on a shoestring, partly because we wanted to fill our obligations for a grant we were getting. But part of it is we wanted to practice what we're preaching, and like part of the point of doing this rolling conference is to sort of share our resources as we go and just try to make it easier and easier for people to host gatherings like this. And also I'm very big on experiential learning, and so I thought it'd be really helpful for all these time banks to host something. And it just gives them a reason to get more people in the room than they might otherwise and shake things up a little bit. And it really did have that impact. So we focused on health and wellness, and Sayana and I did a presentation about the Allied Community Co-op, and we end up talking about that a lot because for me, it's the project that we have that most clearly exemplifies trying to put this theory into practice about how we really make something go. So I have high hopes and expectations for it, and even just the fact that we've mapped it out so far is a value to the world, that I think that we can get a lot done there. Then we went to Louisville, Kentucky, and oh, I really love this though, because as you saw earlier, our game is called the Build a Better World game, and then it was really wonderful because we went out for Chinese food on the last day there, and the founder of the Louisville Time Bank got that fortune. And then the other thing is when Bernard Lietaer was here, we went out for Chinese food, and his fortune said, "You don't need to worry about money. The best things in life are free." So I feel like we have good fortune. Louisville is particularly interesting because they are taking on a health and wellness focus in some ways, and they're an interesting situation because they have very new, part of the reason we went there is we were invited by a very sort of high-level amalgamation of healthcare organizations to come and talk with them about time banking. It was me and Kathy Perlow, who runs a hospital-based time bank. So we got to meet, I don't know if you guys know Robin Young or Youngson from New Zealand. He's a great physician, and they had these big healthcare-oriented roundtables, and it was fascinating. And they have a very new time bank, and so that was part of what Kathy and I were there to do, is help navigate that space where taking on this, like the time bank didn't have a governance structure yet when we got there. They had no way to make the decision about if they were going to go to this high-level partnership, and we felt there was a big, and they felt there was a big danger of them really getting dragged around by that partnership. So that was something we went to help them navigate. They have since created their governance process. They've adopted a really interesting model of dynamic governance. Part of how they're going to pay me back for spending 5 days of my life there without being paid is that they're going to help take that forward and teach other people what they've learned about dynamic governance. Next piece, I went to Europe. So Mark and I presented at the International Complementary Currencies Conference in The Hague, which is a great excuse to get over there, and then I set up some other stops. So the very first place I went is this great festival in the UK, and the reason I included this, I'm not going to talk about every stop, don't worry. The reason I included this one is I met a woman there who, she came to my presentation, and then she ended up showing up at the meeting we had in Bristol a few days later. And she's doing this, and it turns out she's doing her PhD about time banking and related things. So she's going to be coming here to work with us in the next couple months. And that's why I wanted to include that. I included Bristol because they didn't have any time bank. I just went and met with them because I have a friend who lives there who was interested. But now one of them, there's this BMW is in the car manufacturer, Tate, I think it's an art museum. Something that he's going to start a time bank as a project within this thought leader context. So that was cool. These folks are in Paris. This woman, Sybil, with the longer hair up there, is really wonderful, and she also is doing a lot of stuff with games as learning tools. This is a mutual credit game that we played. We had the opportunity to go and do a workshop at a Paris business school. One day of the year they put towards social responsibility. So we went for Social Responsibility Day and did some stuff about mutual credit. And I was excited there because the young woman in her report out said she wants to start that in her community. And here we are playing the Build a Better World game with these people in Paris. So that's part of what I'm interested in doing, is seeing all the different cultural contexts. And we presented at The Hague. Here's Mark. Here's us right before our presentation. And I just like to show this because this is one of the ways I was contextualizing stuff. So Mark started with the theory about the ecosystem stuff and the applications of these different things. And then my part, I started with this picture of everyone gathered at the Capitol. The reason I did is because when I was at the Capitol with 200,000 other people at the Capitol, and it was so exciting and it seemed like everything was possible, I felt like the ask that I was hearing was, we want state and manufacturing jobs 40 hours a week with good benefits. And I was just like, we had 200,000 people at the Capitol in the year well, I guess it was 2011 at that time, and this is the best we can dream up. And going back to those questions earlier, like what would you do to improve your community if you could? And then what would you do if money were no object? And is money an object? I was like, you know, if with this many people, if money were no object, we can afford to dream better. So that was part of what we talked about, is exercising our dreaming muscles. And the one thing that I said that got cheers was I said, no one should have to do 40 hours of anything unless they really want to. Oh, yeah. Then Doers Days was the day for practitioners, and that's our open space session up there where we delved into the mutual aid network. I did forget to mention, so we presented our paper, and then also I was on a panel about time banking, and I didn't show a picture of that. And then another thing that was very cool during the open space day, Matthew, who programmed our software, had invited a couple game designers, like professional game designers, so they could come and do a session with me and Sybil and help us improve our games. And so our game went from the version that you saw earlier, so this is the new version. They just had us change it into a spiral. And this game, and this reflects what I think about time banking. I think time banking is an especially effective experiential learning tool about this kind of stuff because it breaks your economy down into people, assets, and needs and how they flow. And so it really helps start to break apart a little bit of the sort of money sickness that we tend to carry around with us. Or one of the reasons I want to be really active in the complementary currency world is people get really hung up on currency mechanics and velocity and all these different things. And not that it's not informative, and not that it can't be important. It can be important, but people really tend to lose sight of what the point is. And in my view, like really doing currency for the sake of how your currency is flowing and how many exchanges are happening. I don't think people should do exchanges if they don't need to exchange something. But I think it's just a different, in my view, it's a different form of capitalism, like looking at the tool as the end in itself instead of the means to an end. So that was really what part of what I'm trying to accomplish in that world, is to just like refocus on what's the point. And that's the drawing that we made for that, where I did the cooperative as an umbrella. But just hammering out, it was very helpful to have all these people who are really immersed in currencies. One of the people up there runs Bay Bucks in San Francisco, and there's different people. There's someone from Paco Palmas in Brazil. So it's really good to have people who've been very immersed in this stuff, like just hammering through it with us. So then, after the Europe leg of the trip, I went out to the West Coast and up the coast and back. So there are a lot of stops I'm not touching on. RSF Social Finance and Sustainable Economies Law Center are two groups that I really wanted to go through the mechanics of this stuff with. So RSF Social Finance, they actually have helped fund us in the past, and they manage money, and they manage huge amounts of money. RSS stands for Rudolf Steiner Foundation, so it was originally started as a Steiner thing and started among Waldorf schools, and then ended up growing into a huge sort of innovative social financing group. They manage money in all the ways that we're talking about wanting to manage these pools of money. So they do saving and lending, they do creative lending, they do granting and all kinds of investment money pooling stuff. And really, so this picture up here, there's Greg Bloom. Some of you knew him from when he came and worked with us last year. So he traveled with me for a bit there and helped out. And then two people from RSF Social Finance, and I can't remember everyone's name, so I won't name any of them, and two people from Sustainable Economies Law Center. And Sustainable Economies Law Center is like the premier organization that's working on law in regards to complementary currencies. And this realm is pretty new, and as you learn more about it, you'll see there's a lot of legal and financial gray area, like financial in terms of tax implications, and that's something that we really are working to work through. It's not like anyone is just like looking to, I mean, in some ways it's important to kind of go under the radar until you have something worth going for better policies about. And that's, again, I mentioned it earlier, that's part of our goal with connecting these different pieces, to have cleaner avenues for those things to happen in the ways they're supposed to happen legally and tax-wise. And then this is a drawing we did at that, just getting into each time this comes up, and I'm just including this so you can see each time it comes up, it just has more detail. So we went even more into the possible inputs into the savings pool and more into the possible outputs. So inputs, we have savings, we have donors who just donate money, we have investors who are looking for a low return on their investments, never a high return. We have fundraising that we would do, like crowdfunding. Buying time, I'm very interested in creating a situation where people who have, if you're working full time and you're getting a salary, you can put some of your, like a percentage of your salary in there. So I'm gonna just throw out a number. So say I'm working full time and I earn $40,000 a year. And I say, well, I could do 10% of my time, I could get time bank hours instead of money. I would put 10% of my money into that pool as a gift. And then for that amount of my work time, I would take time bank hours from the group. So you're not like paying for time, but it's a way that people can invest their money. So what I'm looking for, again, it's about integrating these things. What I'm looking for is ways that people can earn time bank hours for what they're doing already with most of your time. So a lot of people are too busy, but they would like to participate in that way. And then you can help build up the monetary resources for people who might not have as much access to that, but who might be able to earn more time. And then you can take time for that. Part of the point is right now, if I were to say, I want to get time bank hours at my job, I would have a big mess and I wouldn't be able to do it because your employer wouldn't be legally allowed to do that because of labor laws. Your employer would have to be really on board with it in order to even look into that. And so it's just another way. So again, I'm just looking to integrate different types of work and different types of compensation so people can have enough variety to meet their variety of needs and do a variety of work. But anyhow, yeah. So those ones will be things to hammer out later. And then outputs would be loans, paying people for the work that they're doing on a project, grants to people or to projects, risk pooling, so you could choose to have your pool of money operate like a mutual aid society. So we'll all save $100 a year, and if someone breaks their arm under particular terms, we'll go ahead and pay whatever, we'll give them that money or give them a no interest loan for whatever isn't covered by their insurance deductible or things like that. So that's an example of how you use it for risk pooling. And also to have money pooled for administration for the tools that you're using. And that's another issue for us in the time bank, because it's always hard to get money for administration. Another highlight that I saw traveling around is there are a lot of regional umbrella groups springing up to support their local time banks. So here we have Time Banks in Puget Sound up in Seattle, and there's Edgar Kahn joining us by Skype. That was one of our more formal gatherings. Up in the left-hand corner, we have the California Federation of Time Banks in LA. Up top, we have in the top and middle there, that's in Kent, Ohio, and they're forming the Crooked River Alliance of Time Banks. Up in the top right I got to go to the launch of the new Pontiac Sun Time Bank, and that's being launched by Kim Hodge up there on the left, who runs the Michigan Alliance of Time Banks. And this bottom one is actually this middle and bottom on the right-hand side are both Mid-Atlantic Time Banks. So their thing was pretty cool because they did sort of a progressive gathering. So in New York, we did one big training for people who were already experienced in running time banks. So it was sort of a higher level in-depth training. And then the next day in Media, Pennsylvania, we did a training for beginning time banks. So but one of the things that is clear is that we need help supporting each other and how we support each other. And so one of the results of this trip is we're going to aim to do a leadership retreat in the summer. And actually, I have some things to invite you guys to, because there will also be an international conference in Rhode Island in the summer. So we'll do a leadership retreat and then that conference. Other connections are a lot of health and social justice projects. So I pointed out earlier, there's Paul Glover up in the middle left, and he was the founder of Ithaca Hours, and he's developing a wellness cooperative that is a very beautiful vision. So we went to meet with him about what's going on. And he has all the pieces he needs except for $500,000 to buy the land, so whoever wants to step up. The guy on the right there is Scott Morris, and he traveled with me for a little bit. I met him in The Hague, and we had emailed before because he actually, in his local work, has come to almost identical conclusions that we have. And I found people in different places around the world who also have, where they have decided to turn into a cooperative, they've decided to add in the savings pool piece and connect. So to me, that says something positive, is that so many different people in different places came to the same conclusion. So that's how we first started talking. He's right now acting as a consultant to Ithaca New York, who is doing the Ithaca Hours project, and they are in a similar process to us of looking at how they integrate into a more comprehensive thing. And he's starting, there's a group that actually paid for my travel to the Netherlands. They're called Coin, Q-O-I-N, based in Amsterdam. He's starting the US branch of that. So one of the things that they will be doing is bringing their software here, which deals with all the different pieces that we want to do, and we can evaluate if that works for us or not. I had 6 events in 2 days in Massachusetts between, around Boston and UMass Dartmouth. It was insane. Yeah, it was crazy. But I was on a panel doing this Divest from Fossil Fuels thing, and author Chuck Collins was the main speaker there. Did something at Veterans on the Rise in Washington, D.C. And then here's Kathy Perlow. She's the originator of the Neighbor to Neighbor Care team. So I was able to spend 2 days with her, just really learning about how she's setting up her Neighbor to Neighbor Care teams and getting things shared online. Some good things there. And then the other thing that came up, that has come up a number of times, is people are interested in developing a time bank where we can travel and stay with other people. And I'm showing you the French people up here. This is Paris, us playing a game at this workshop. Because in France and some of the Belgian systems, they have a very great model. And I actually just reached out to them, and they're willing to partner with us so we can learn from them or collaborate with them and just jump on to what they're doing. But the first time we went to France to present a couple of years ago, we got put up with someone who's part of this. So what happens, their equivalent of time banks are called CELs, S-E-L, and if they have rules, so if you're a member of your local group for a certain amount of time, then you can travel and you can spend 1 time credit per night to stay with people who are in the system. So that was one of the things we did, is we found people in Chicago who want to start it. Tampa Bay, Florida, I have up there because there's a woman insisting that people come and use her house. LA, I was hosted in the lap of luxury, and someone made beautiful meals and delivered them every day through the time bank. And then Paris, and that's one of the things we're doing in this NIDA network process now. That's the process of connecting with people around the world to really develop these things further. Is we do have a work group to flesh that out. So if people are interested, you are more than welcome to help make that happen. In between tour stops, we did a deep dive discussion about how these things connect. And one of the things we did was strengths and limitations of each of our systems. And so Madison Hours, local currency, the time bank, and then the community resource pool or the savings pool. And just realized that the strengths of some make up for the limitations of others. And we would just really think with the 3 types of tools at our disposal, we can actually fill in a lot of the gaps. Giftable was a gift economy festival in Istanbul, Turkey. And you probably can't tell, but this guy here, second from the right, he was the same guy in that picture in Walk Out, Walk On. He's from that Brazil project that did the cultural center. And this was amazing. The woman right next to him is Deborah Fries, the one who facilitated that stuff or helped facilitate all that. A bunch of these people are from Berkana Network, so they're doing those translocal projects. And Deborah Fries happens to live right with and be very good friends with all those people who hosted those 6 events in Massachusetts. So she's going to jump in and help us out in these processes. Did a crowdfunding workshop with Ian McKenzie so we can be better positioned to raise money for all this stuff. And lest I forget, Edgar Kahn, the founder of Time Banking, and his wife, Chris Gray, were were helping out and participating in a lot of the stuff on the East Coast, hosted the Veterans on the Rise gathering. And then ended the tour where it all began, which is with this woman in the middle, Renee Marver, and she started the first modern time bank in this country around 1981. And she gave us a lot of the materials that they use, so we're going through it now. Yeah, and as I said, it totaled to 68 gatherings, 1,437 people total. And then after I got back, we held our first design team meeting to design mutual aid networks. And then we ended up dividing into 4 main subgroups, and you are welcome to participate in any of them. Social, which is about membership, communication, budgeting tools, sort of the processes to support people and make agreements. Legal, so all the aspects of understanding how parts can be nonprofit and parts can be for-profit, and how we have to incorporate to be on the up and up. Financial, just tackling these money issues that have come up with the community-supported resources, and technical, software, system design, and things like that. So, which work group would you like to do? Now, that's where we are now. So what we are looking to do is we have a lot of raw materials. We have a lot of projects in the Dane County Time Bank. What we've talked about as a staff this year is really taking a look at North and East Madison and Dane County, because we have our new project in Sun Prairie and surrounding areas with neighbor-to-neighbor care teams. We started in the north side of Madison and East Madison, so we have a lot of members there. The Feed Kitchen, that's a code kitchen that's designed to really provide accessible ways that people can do economic development work and develop their own skills and have more food available, is another potential partner on the north and east side. And we have our medical transportation wellness project. And in Allied, we have the wellness project. We have Maxine's Time Bank store where you can get stuff for your time bank hours. And we have the co-op with all the partners who've agreed to be part of the co-op and who are looking for ways, especially to develop employment skills, employment opportunities, and also reduce the need for full-time employment by developing other kinds of community supports. And then we have this Power Time project coming up. And so what we're looking to do now is like take all this and make soup. So we have the projects, we have the tools at our disposal. So the resource pooling and allocation tools. There's one piece, well actually, I'm going to come back to this and give you guys a chance to have some clarifying conversations. We have social tools, training and peer support, the comprehensive kind of budgeting we want to do to help people see their way clear to meeting their needs with resources besides money, in addition to money. Dream job creation, about helping people to create the kind of work that they want to do. So all this stuff, social tools. And then we are looking to create an infrastructure where you can have a local mutual aid network. I can have one for my block where we choose to become members and pool our resources in support of growing food on all the available surfaces and distributing it in our block. We could have it at the level of a neighborhood like the Allied Energy Project, where we have a mutual aid network in support of doing good work, whether it's focused on energy exclusively or whether it's a broader focus. It's up to the people doing it. We can have a food shed size one. So we have the local mutual aid networks and then a global one where those are all behaving as a cooperative and combining and sharing resources. So those are the tools at our disposal, and the question is, what do we do with those raw materials? So really most of the rest of the time, we're gonna brainstorm, we're gonna get into some of your questions that you have and share ideas about what we do with what we have. Let me see if there's anything else. And then there are a couple questions to ask, because we don't need to add things just to add things. One question, where is time banking sufficient? Because in some cases we might not need to do anything different. Where would additional tools be helpful? Which ones and why? And then if we don't have what we need, where can we find it? And what next? Let's go into this. Are people clear on the dollar mutual credit? Works like a time bank but has a price on it. You pay the taxes on it. Businesses can exchange it. Another place, this might come in handy. Sometimes people don't want to put their professional services into the time bank or are very limited with how much they can. So say I'm a physical therapist. For example, I might have licensing issues that make it hard for me to put that into the time bank. I might be relying on it for my income, or maybe I can do like an hour a month for a time bank, but I can't do any more than that. Perhaps that's a place for dollar-based mutual credit, because it would operate more like dollars and you'd be able to spend it in the businesses that you would have spent your money at. So that is another function that could fill.